Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're doing a bit of digital archaeology. We are going on a journey into what is honestly probably the largest collaborative code-breaking project in the history of video games. Yep, we're talking about Minecraft. But we're not looking at building dirt huts or fighting creepers today. We're actually looking past the interface, straight down into the underlying architecture of the game. We're going to explore how an entire community basically banded together to literally decipher a locked, scrambled codebase, and, in the process, turned a totally closed digital environment into this massive canvas for open collaboration.
And that brings us to the central mystery of today's explainer. We all know Minecraft has, tens of thousands of mods? It's famous for it. But in the early days, Minecraft was distributed as a compiled, heavily obfuscated Java binary. To put it simply, it was a locked black box. The code was intentionally scrambled so human eyes couldn't read it. So if you've ever downloaded a custom mod pack, you really owe your entire experience to one massive question. How on earth did millions of players manage to fundamentally modify a game that they literally could not read?
Okay, let's really dive into this. To understand the absolute hurdle early modders were up against, just compare clean, normal Java code, like public boolean spawn entity-o, which is great, it tells you exactly what the code is about to do. Compare that with the terrifying gibberish of Mojang's raw code. I mean, imagine opening up a file and just staring at boolean a rw snowman. Yes, that is literally a snowman character sitting right there in the middle of the code. If you wanted to build a mod, this is what you were looking at, just thousands and thousands of lines of completely meaningless characters. So why the gibberish? Well, it's the result of a process called ProGuard obfuscation. Before releasing the game to the public, Mojang ran their code through a tool called ProGuard, and this thing intentionally scrambles everything. It takes your logical, human-readable classes and variables and just replaces them with randomized, incredibly short characters. Why do that? Two main reasons, really. First, it dramatically shrinks the final file size, and second, it heavily deters reverse engineering, which protects the developer's intellectual property. But for anyone trying to tinker with the game, it creates an absolutely impenetrable black box. But you know, that didn't stop the early community. Not at all. Back in the 2009 era, we're talking alpha and beta days, players resorted to this incredibly brute force method called jar modding. Since the game was distributed as a specialized zip archive, a .jar file, early modders would literally hack open the Minecraft.jar file and directly replace the vanilla compiled classes with their own edited ones. And just to get the game to boot up without instantly crashing, they had to aggressively delete a security folder called meta-inf to bypass Mojang's digital signatures. It was rough, it was incredibly tedious, and honestly, it broke the game constantly.
What we're really looking at here is a community acting as digital archaeologists. There's this fascinating academic paper called The Textual Voxel that points this out perfectly. Because the game was this locked-down binary, the community literally had to bypass compilation boundaries just to read, translate, and re-author the source code. These weren't just gamers playing a sandbox anymore. They were initiating this deeply collaborative relationship with the execution engine itself. They were forcing their way through the compiler just to take ownership of the digital space.
Then came the massive breakthrough. It was 2010, and a developer named Michael Stoik, who goes by Surge in the community, got together with a dedicated team and created the Mod Coder Pack, or MCP. This toolkit was an absolute game changer. It completely automated the setup of a modding environment and gave everyone the critical tools they needed to finally crack that obfuscated code wide open. It took the brutal manual headache of jar modding and turned it into a streamlined, accessible system for everyone.
So let's break down exactly how MCP actually pulled this off. It split the workflow into three really crucial steps. First, you decompile the game. So that means translating the binary bytecode back into Java code. Second, and this is the big one, you deobfuscate that code, translating those scrambled random snowman names back into actual human-readable text. Then the modder writes their custom code, and MCP steps back in for step 3, re-obfuscation. It takes your new modded code and translates it back into the scrambled gibberish so the official Minecraft engine can actually read it and run it.
But that second step, the deobfuscation, that was the real magic trick. I mean, how does a program know that a random letter A is actually supposed to mean spawn entity? Well, it required the community to essentially build a digital Rosetta Stone. They had to invent these massive, complex dictionaries that they called mappings. And these mappings served as translation layers, carefully logging exactly which scrambled character corresponded to which actual game function.
Building those translation layers was just an incredibly ingenious process. It all started at the bottom with notch mappings. That's the raw, chaotic bytecode that completely changed every single time the game updated. Now, to stop mods from breaking on every update, they built a middle layer, surge mappings. This layer assigned unique, stable numeric identifiers to everything. And finally, that translated into MCP mappings, the human-readable descriptive names like spawn entity that developers actually use to write their code. It's just a stunningly organized system, stepping all the way from total chaos to perfect human logic. When you really step back and think about the philosophical magnitude of this, it's pretty staggering. As that paper, The Textual Voxel, puts it, through this mapping taxonomy, de-obfuscation is transformed into an act of collective authorship. Cracking this code was absolutely not the job of one isolated hacker sitting in a basement, because you had all these developers needing to work on the exact same base code without constantly breaking each other's mods. Creating these mappings had to be this massive, decentralized group effort. And what's truly fascinating is how they actually went about crowdsourcing that meaning. They used automated tools like MCBot running on IRC channels and later on Discord. Developers from literally all over the world would actively submit, discuss, and vote on what to name thousands of previously scrambled variables. If someone finally figured out what a specific chunk of math was doing to, say, a block of dirt, they'd submit a name for it. They were quite literally crowdsourcing the human-readable translation of an entire video game. This whole incredible effort perfectly lines up with research from the Crafting Minecraft study, which talks about the community as a producage ecosystem. Producage basically means the players aren't just passively consuming a product, they're actively producing the experience itself. If you've ever left feedback on a Minecraft Reddit thread or forum, you were part of this massive spectrum. You were participating right alongside the advanced coders who were effectively rewriting the core mathematical engine of the game through those community mappings. And because Minecraft was developed so organically over so many years, diving into its de-obfuscated codebase really was like digging through a digital archaeological site. Modders would find these stratified layers of legacy logic, really old routines, and just massive amounts of technical debt lingering right beneath the surface. It was a messy, living document. Building stable mods on top of this constantly shifting, chaotic foundation, that was an unbelievable technical feat. But sometimes that foundation experienced a massive earthquake. Take version 1.13, for example, infamously known as the flattening. Mojang fundamentally restructured the game's logic. They ripped out old legacy numeric block IDs, completely changed how chunks and biomes were formatted, and totally altered the underlying serialization logic. Now, it was a totally necessary cleanup of that technical debt, but for the modding scene, it acted as a digital seismic event. It instantly broke the community's meticulously built mappings and basically split the modding community for years. Now let's jump to 2019 and see how all of this builds to an incredibly satisfying conclusion. After a solid decade of the community fighting tooth and nail to de-obfuscate the game, Mojang officially capitulated, and in the best way possible. They actually released their internal ProGuard obfuscation logs, which became known as Moj maps. By finally handing over the official keys to the black box, Mojang provided a true lingua franca, a common language that validated a decade of struggle and helped unify developers across different modding platforms like Forge and Fabric. So here's the really crucial takeaway from all of this. The strict, intentional, technical constraints of Minecraft's obfuscated black box, they didn't stop collaboration. They actually ignited it. Over a decade, the desperate need to decode this game birthed one of the most legendary collaborative software engineering communities on the entire internet. You literally had entire generations of kids and hobbyists learning advanced Java programming, version control, and system architecture simply because they wanted to, add a new sword or a cool new biome to their favorite game. Which leaves me with a final, slightly provocative thought for you to chew on as we wrap this up. When we look back at the history of Minecraft, what is its ultimate legacy? Is it the multi-billion-dollar game itself? Or is the true value the massive, completely accidental computer science education it forced upon millions of players? Players who learned to decode, translate, and completely rewrite the rules of their digital world. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep wondering, and as always, keep looking past the screen.